E3 is widely considered to be the most exciting time of the year to be a gamer. New game announcements by the biggest publishers in the world, gameplay demos of the most exciting upcoming titles, and jaw-dropping announcements at conferences, and a lot of those are big surprises. E3 2018 brought with it a lot of good, but now comes the confirmation that Sony, one of E3's mainstays for the last 24 years, would not be making a presence at E3 2019. Leaving some gamers disappointed, maybe a little shocked, and overall questioning why. Why did Sony make the decision to skip out on the biggest gaming event of the year? Well, I'll try to give you some insight, a lens from Sony's vantage point, and assess why this does make a ton of sense for them. Yes, it's disappointing from the eyes of a gamer, but if you dig deeper, there's a lot to uncover here. First of all, let's go back to E3 of this year. As I mentioned, E3 is generally the big event every year where we see a lot of new announcements from the traditional E3 press conferences. However, for Sony, 2018 was quite a bit different. Rather than holding that typical conference, they removed the entire element of surprise from their conference from the get-go and said, hey, this year at E3, we are just focusing on showing gameplay of 4 existing exclusives that we already announced. Those titles being The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Death Stranding, and Marvel Spider-Man. Now, they did sprinkle in some lighter announcements here and there, but nothing earth-shattering that is typical of an E3 conference. On paper, that might have seemed like a little bit of a disappointment, but in actuality, for a PlayStation fan, I thought it was a thoroughly enjoyable conference, highlighting some of the most anticipated games while devoid of surprises. For what it was an enjoyable show. It does beg the question, however, why did Sony go this route? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory in my opinion. Sony doesn't have much more in the pipeline in terms of marquee exclusives for the PlayStation 4 that is unannounced. What's already announced, however, is pretty great. I mean, we've got Days Gone, Dreams, Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Death Stranding. Those are some pretty major games, and it's hard to not be excited for those. But I fully expect those titles to be the games that round out the life of the PlayStation 4, and in some instances with a game like Death Stranding, I could even see a title like that being cross-generation. Me saying cross-generation is of course pointing towards the PlayStation 5, which we all know is in the works. Now, before I talk more about the PlayStation 5, I just want to dispel the notion that it's way too early for a PS5, and I've been seeing a lot of comments about that. A lot of you guys are disappointed that a PlayStation 5 is in the works, and it might be announced sometime in 2019, and yes, while it might not be released in 2019, we are coming up on that time period that we should be hearing more and more about next generation. And we probably should be hearing a formal announcement in the next 8 to 12 months. Maybe you guys haven't realized, but it's already been 5 years since the release of the PlayStation 4. 5 years is coming towards the conclusion of a console life cycle. To give you guys some reference, the PlayStation 2 was released in 2000, the PlayStation 3 came in 2006, the PlayStation 4 came in 2013. So 6 years between the PS2 to PS3 and 7 years between the PS3 to the PS4. And I'll offer you this, that a lot of people thought the PS3 overstayed its welcome and wanted a PS4 a bit earlier. It's also a little bit funny, a lot of people would say that the PlayStation 3 came a little bit early, but that was more of an issue on a Sony end, and it's not like gamers weren't ready for a PS3. Gamers were ready for the Xbox 360, so the PS3 should have come in line. However, it just had a faulty launch. That was the issue with the PS3. A 6 to 7 year time span before a new console is a very long time, and yes, it is kind of hard to imagine that the PlayStation 4 was released all the way back in 2013. To me, it does feel like yesterday, but facts are facts, it's been over 5 years. Now, I'll also say with the PlayStation 4, it is a little bit different because we had the release of the Pro, and maybe that muddies the waters a little bit to you guys, but the Pro was never intended to be a console life extender. It was always something for more enthusiast console gamers to pick up and enjoy a couple of perks. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not like there were ever exclusive games released on the Pro. It's not like the performance differential from the PlayStation 4, the base model, to the Pro was that extreme. Yes, a couple of nice perks, but nothing that was really ever intended to be a console lifecycle extender. If you bought the Pro with that notion in mind, that's kind of on you for expecting something that the Pro was never going to be. So with that spiel out of the way, with Sony working on the PlayStation 5 and the major first-party studios probably working on games for that console outside of the studios that are working on PS4 exclusives, there's a lot of ideas being thrown around on how you could announce the console. So yes, you could announce the console at E3, but I don't think that's actually the right time to make that announcement. There's so much going on as a part of E3 that Sony would probably rather dedicate a whole conference to the PlayStation 5 separate from E3 at its own venue. And if you think that's a bit over the top, well, remember that Sony did the exact same thing for the PlayStation 4, so it's absolutely not, and I imagine they want to replicate something similar because the PS4 was so successful. Also, there are rumblings that after its 2018 absence, PlayStation Experience, the PlayStation-centric event, will be making a comeback in 2019. So what better way to bring that event back with a bang than to make it all about the PlayStation 5? I think it makes all the sense in the world, and rather than trying to stir up a lot of noise at E3, which I think would still work, I think if you announced the PS5 at E3, a lot of people would take notice. However, designing the PlayStation 5 and doing the major reveals at a time and place where Sony really controls the narrative from a business and promotional standpoint, it seems to be a winner of a formula. And if we were to have an E3 conference and and have it similar to 2018's conference, revolve around PlayStation 4 content we already know about, again, just like how we had it this year, I really do think that this time around it would be negatively received. It was cool as a novelty conference this year, and even some gamers were displeased by it at this point, but to go 2 back-to-back years and do that, I just don't think that would resonate well at all. Especially if all it is just more gameplay of the same games, barring Spider-Man because it's already out, but just more gameplay of games like Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, and Death Stranding. Yes, it would be cool to see more of those games, but we've had our fill. E3 is supposed to be a time about big surprising announcements, and to hold a conference not offering that, that would be a disappointment to do that 2 back-to-back years. And if you guys are unaware, the most recent rumor is that Sony will announce the PlayStation 5 sometime in the middle of 2019. Now, it's a rumor, so take it with a grain of salt, but it's also being suggested that a full-blown reveal will happen at that year's PlayStation experience. PSX is typically held in December, so I'd imagine the PlayStation reveal pattern would be similar to the PS4. The PS4 was announced at a standalone conference in February of 2013, and then the full announcement came at E3 of 2013. The timing is just a little bit different, where it would be announced in the middle of the year and then fully revealed at the end. The first conference with the PlayStation 4 showed some of the specs as well as gameplay of specific titles such as Killzone Shadowfall and Infamous Second Son. Following a similar pattern and then allowing games to be playable at PlayStation Experience would be a great way to go, and it would bring a lot of excitement to the return of PSX as this major gaming event. And again, with PlayStation Experience being an event held by Sony, it's an event where they really can control the narrative. I know that's something that consumers shouldn't care about, but from the eyes of Sony, it does make a lot of sense to do that. So that's my take. I know a lot of you guys are disappointed by the announcement of Sony missing out on E3, and I can understand why as a consumer, but if you take a look at it from their vantage point, I feel like it makes a lot of sense. And don't get it twisted. Yes, E3 is incredible, but don't think that means that Sony has nothing in the works or they aren't going to engage their audience in other ways with public events and announcements. Do you really think Sony's gonna disappear from the face of the earth and not announce any PlayStation exclusive? No, the PlayStation brand lives and dies based on its exclusive offerings, and I think Sony understands that more than ever now. Sony knows what made them so successful this generation, and I fully expect them to continue doing what brought them here. So that's gonna conclude this video. Let me know what you guys think and sound off with all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye.